Esports has been growing exponentially for a long time. People have been playing video games for decades. Ever since our board advisor Nolan Bushnell first created the video game in 1973, it has become a phenomenon.
As the old saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. Where many have buckled under the uncertainty of the last couple of years, others have gone on to ride the wave into new and digital horizons. If Malta Week 2021 reveals anything, it's the fact that the future belongs to the brave and the bold, willing to innovate. Here with us today, we have the movers and shakers of the new age of online gaming, willing to ride the silver lining into the sunset.
And as for all things in gaming, there had to be a visionary that came up with a new idea.
Well, I think that to understand Atari, it was we were constantly fighting technology that wasn't ready yet. The chips didn't want to go at video speeds. The early games were not even von Neumann architecture. Now, that's geek speak. They had no programs. They were just hardware constructs. And so we were up against the issue of not what did we want to do, what was it possible to do? And that was where I think we did a really good job of pushing the envelope right up to the edge.
Casinos have been evolving for a while, but a sense of urgency fell on the industry during the pandemic.
In the beginning, you basically had a completely new form of media, such as the internet. The casinos and the land-based operators knew that this potential was out there, but it was still the Wild West. There was really no safety barriers, no structure on how to design things or anything like that. We still had ugly websites that literally said nothing and all the rest. And what happened was most of these companies saw the potential of what could be built from their already established businesses. So, like most smart investors, Gaming One wanted to analyze what was going to be done. And by 2011, they were already lobbying for the regulations to allow these online casinos to exist. And they were one of the first ones to push into that market to basically work as a type of unification between the land-based product and the online product. Now, at that time, probably land was much more popular than online because of accessibility and everything else. But now in our world, the online presence is much more heavier and lucrative. But we don't want to forget the land-based because it almost works like an anchor to hold us down to what we originally started. And online is basically the wave of the future, and it's a boat on a harbor going around in a big circle. And with Gaming One going forward with trying to do regulations by 2011 to make it legal, they were there on the original steps to make sure that it was fundamentally safe, secure, and it was basically the new wave of going forward in an entertaining yet secure manner.
This also helped esports to evolve to new levels of popularity.
Esports has been growing exponentially for a long time. People have been playing video games for decades. Ever since our board advisor Nolan Bushnell first created the video game in 1973, it has become a phenomenon. Ever since computers and consoles became part of households, it's just grown exponentially. I think what's changed in the past 10, 15 years is that competitive gaming, internet access, and also the evolution of the demographics of the people playing the games. I've been in gaming for 20 years, and 10 years ago people in iGaming looked at esports and said, well, that's really 14-year-olds playing computer games in their rooms. Perhaps that was true 10 years ago, but those 14-year-olds now have jobs. They're still into video gaming. I'm 44, I'm probably a dinosaur in terms of video gaming, but I still play video games when I can, when my job allows me to, and when my children allow me to. Not as often as I'd like. But the total addressable market of people watching esports, playing video games, and how they consume that media, they consume that sport of their choice, is what's driven the growth. They don't need pay-per-view to watch their sport of choice. They just open their laptops, open their phones, and consume it on Twitch and other platforms. And that's what's driven the rise in it.
For some, the pandemic was the perfect opportunity to grow.
Well, for us, it's the aspect of if we know automatically that our customer base or the players that are online seem to enjoy a specific type of game. Once COVID came out, which actually worked in our favor, what I realized as well is that the games now started to step away from just automatically slots and table games. We now have games that actually push it a little, push the gambling element a little more differently without necessarily having to have real spin in front of your face. And by jumping to a next generation, it's the question of, okay, this is the technology that we have now. This is where we think it's going to go. But if it does go that way, how do we jump ahead of the game to make sure that we're at the forefront and the pioneer to then spearhead everything else moving forward? As any business that then becomes incredibly lucrative, what happens is they become fat cats and they sit steady. And then all it takes is another young cat to come around who's almost as hungry to then pinpoint and push the fatter cat aside, and the cycle just repeats all over again. I don't wish to be a fat cat. So I want to make sure that I'm at least one step ahead to kind of go, all right, I'm ready for the next wave, because I know that what the trends have been so far, and I know that because everything is virtually cyclical, I can almost predict where we're going to go moving forward from there. And luckily for me, Gaming One is a company that's like, yes, we agree in what you're saying, and we also believe that we should be looking farther into the future. Maybe I'm a little more extreme, but at least I have a company that knows that we can't stay on our laurels now. We have to prepare for where we're going to go moving forward.
Innovation and evolution was much needed when it comes to home entertainment.
I'm always looking for things where businesses collide. Like, what is the appropriate game that we can play on Netflix? What is the streaming environment for games that are character-based, that are AI-rated? How do we merge the technology of gameplay into education? We know that games are very, very instructive, and they're very immersive. There's no such thing as attention deficit disorder in gameplay. So right now, I want to use the game technology to make the world a better place.
The rise in esports didn't lack controversy, such as the idea of loot boxes.
Loot boxes are a controversial topic, and should be regulated. In my opinion, should be regulated strictly. I think there's got to be a clear line between adults playing video games and adults watching and betting on competitive esports, and trying to attract minors to spend money within video games. Two very different topics. But loot boxes should be regulated, as so should wagering on esports. Yes.
But how can one plan for the future of online games?
For me, myself, there's two ways I usually start. One, there's either the math model that's given to us by the mathematician that we either say, hey, that seems to play all right in a simulation. So a simulation is very dry and doesn't have much organic feel to it. And then there's the attitude of, nope, I'm going to do it by the creation of a theme or a story. Cleopatra, Egypt, blah, blah. What we then do, no matter which one comes first, we combine the two together. And much like when you take a watch apart, you do it piece by piece. Each component that's basically going into this game, in my mind, is literally a watch that's been separated. And then the idea is to put it all back together in its proper order to then go, we now have a complete watch again that's now ticking strongly. Every generation move forward, the watch may get bigger or the pieces may get more elaborate, but the rules don't change. It comes down to what are we making, and make sure that every element that's in the game is focused onto the theme, which then overall is still backing up the math. No matter how you want to work these games, the math is still the king. If the game feels good, even with bad graphics, it's going to do well. But if a game does well, a game feels good, and you have incredible graphics, you now have something that's not just enjoyable, it's memorable. And for me, I don't like the terminology of making games, I craft them. So for me, I don't sit there and go, hey, what's the topic of the day? Sharks, okay, and we'll make a game. If they say sharks, I'll go, what type of sharks? What are we looking at? Is it hammerheads? Is it this? And just those few couple of questions will then allow me to calculate what type of game I'm going to be moving forward with. And that's normally how the whole process starts.
Is this popularity of esports going to decline once we get out of the pandemic?
There's this myth that esports had a meteoric rise during the COVID-19 lockdown because everyone was home. It's a myth. I think that rise was going to happen anyway. I really do. Did more people bet on esports because football, there weren't any football games? Perhaps. That was a factor in it. But I think on the whole, if you look at the esport growth curve, COVID-19's helped, but viewership has not diminished since COVID-19 has kind of eased off. The number of people interested in esports, the number of people buying video games, the number of people buying gaming PCs or gaming consoles has not diminished. So that growth curve is still growing. It's not a hockey stick growth curve.
And what shall we expect of the future?
For me, because of my background that I mentioned of me doing console gaming, I remember right now a popular game for esports is Counter-Strike Go. I started playing when it was Counter-Strike. So I saw the evolution of how these games actually evolved. I'm from a generation where you would start off with Doom as a first-person shooter, and if I'm pointing my finger at you and I'm a gun, the bullet will go exactly straight ahead to you. But now we've added random number generators into the shooting, so that way the bullets don't always go forward. They're within a radial. And then from the radial, they started getting bigger, and more elements of chance started being put into the game to allow for a much more realistic feel.
What's happened is that because there's so much, finding a niche is more difficult. And also the game business has devolved into game businesses. Like the games you play on your mobile are very different than the games you play on your console, very different than the games that you play on your platformers. And then there's the other stuff, the whole VR headset world. AR is still a little difficult, Microsoft has played with it, but it's not really grabbed anything. There's a Korean series right now called Memories of Alhambra that really goes crazy on augmented reality. And then, of course, we have Ready Player One, which went crazy on VR. And, I've always felt that good science fiction is a precursor to reality, because you can invent things on the page that haven't been done in the physical world yet. And so I look at all of these things as prescient. But I like the idea that the metaverse is going to be unlike what we expect. I think that it's going to be a lot more interesting than just Second Life redo. I think that the hype around Facebook turning into Meta and some of that, I think that Mark Zuckerberg is going to get a shellacking. It's my gut.
The exciting developments like the metaverse and AR looming on the horizon, all we can say is till now that it is a future. It will be anything but boring. And we're lucky to have industry leaders such as these to be on the vanguard of the leisure of tomorrow.